Good morning. So today we are going to attack chapter 7. You'll remember that last week we did the first couple of lines, but we're going to continue on today with Perek Zion. And you'll remember last time a good name is better than fragrant oil. And you'd pay attention to the poetry here. Tov, Shem, Mishemen, Tov. Okay, the way that he plays with the words. And we also said the day of death is better than the day of birth. You'll recall we talked about two ships, one just starting out. People cheer, but really we don't know what's going to be with that ship. And then another ship quietly comes into harbor after a long voyage. People aren't really there or cheering. But that one has come its full way, and that's the one we should be happy about. So similarly, this idea of having a long life when you're born, who knows what's ahead of you, but when you pass away, again, there's no more difficulty and suffering in life. And there was a belief then, if not now, that there's another world, a better world awaiting you. Okay, so then we come to verse 3. Vexation, in Hebrew, the word is ka'as, which also can mean angry or getting upset about things. Vexation is better than revelry. It's better to be upset about things that are going on around you than to go to a big party. Counterintuitive, why would this be? For though the face be sad, the heart may be glad. From the sad things, the difficult things that we experience in life, ultimately we are able to learn lessons. Whereas when you go to a party, it's momentary, and then tomorrow you're going to wake up with a hangover and regret some of the stupid things you said or did. So that's where he seems to be coming from. Wise men are drawn to a house of mourning, and fools to a house of merrymaking. In other words, when you go to a shiva house and you contemplate life is finite and we are mortal and you better get your act together, that's a positive thing ultimately, even though it's in a sad experience, as opposed to going to a party and thinking this is what life is all about. Okay, we've seen that now several times over and over again. Verse 5, it is better to listen to a wise man's reproof than to listen to the praise of fools. You may remember from Pirkei Avot, Ben Zoma, and the counterintuitive, he asks a question and the counterintuitive answers that we got, right? Who is strong? It's not the man who can lift 300 pounds over his head. It's somebody who can control himself, right? We didn't think that that would be the answer. Who is rich? Not the man with $1 million, but the man who's happy with whatever he has. So similarly, here we have a counterintuitive answer. Which would you rather have? Being rebuked by somebody who's smart, or being praised by somebody who's a fool? We would all think being praised is much better than being yelled at. But the idea is that you could learn from the rebuke of a wise man. And if a fool praises you, what's that worth? Who cares, right? What does he know about anything? For the levity of the fool is like the crackling of nettles under a kettle. Once again, we see here the incredible poetry, but again, you'd only see it in the Hebrew. So listen to the commentary here. This saying is onomatopoeic, okay? So onomatopoeia is going on, crackling with repeated K sounds, sibilants, and I vowels pronounced E, ki kechol hasirim tachat hasir, ken sechok hakasil. It's almost like the Hebrew words are imitating the sound of if you took these thorns and threw them into the fire, right? There's going to be this crackling sound and the S sound of the steam coming off of the kettle here. So again, listen in the Hebrew. Ki kechol hasirim tachat hasir ken sechok hakasil. And then another thing, deeper even, is that the word sirim, meaning thorns, is a pun on seer, which means kettle. And the commentary adds, the levity, in other words, the laughter of the fool is as vapid and irritating as nettles crackling in the fire. And thorns, unlike wood, produce no useful heat when burnt. That is, they provide no enlightenment. So in other words, being around fools who are laughing, it's worthless. You may think that I'd rather have laughter than sadness and groaning and crying. But if it's the laughter of fools, it's worth nothing. Again, going back to the very beginning of the book, it's just like hevel, havalim. It's just like the breath that's it's gone and it has no real substance. Okay, so he says, second half of the verse 6, but that too is illusory. Okay, for cheating may rob the wise man of reason and destroy the prudence of the cautious. All right, so again, things that you think are great and wonderful ultimately may not turn out to be so. And then he tells us in verse 8, the end of the matter is better than the beginning of it. This is a summary of what we've seen. You know, going to a house of mourning is better than going to a house of feasting. Better a patient spirit than a haughty spirit. Okay? Then verse 9, don't let your spirit be quickly vexed, for vexation abides in the breasts of fools. Don't let yourself get upset. In other words, take a deep breath, and all the things that happen around you or that people say to you, you know what? Don't take it so seriously. Don't take it to heart. Count to 10 and just move on. That's what he's telling us. And then in verse 9, we read, don't let your spirit be quickly vexed, for vexation abides in the breasts of fools. 10, don't say, how has it happened that former times were better than these? Very interesting. Al tomar, ma haya shehayamim harishonim. Don't say, how is it that the earlier times, hayu tovim me'ela, are better than these? Kilo me hochma sha'alta alzeh. How often do we become nostalgic? Do we think about, you know what, it used to be much better than it is now? He said, don't even think that. Not that it's not true. It might be true. It might very well be true that the olden days were better than today. But you shouldn't be bringing up the question because A, what are you going to do about it? And B, it might not be true, okay? So don't say, how has it happened that former times were better than these? For it is not wise of you to ask that question. It may be truth, but it's not wise to ask the question. You're not going to know for sure, were the 50s better than now, right? In terms of how life was, simpler times, better times, who knows? But if you concentrate on that, Kohelet is telling us you're wasting your time because you're never going to know, and what's the point of it? Even if it used to be better, so how's that going to make our lives better now, knowing that things used to be much better than they are today? It is not wise of you to ask that question. Mechachma sha'alta, ki lo mechachma. It's not wise to ask that. Verse 11. Wisdom is as good as a patrimony. Patrimony meaning an inheritance. Okay? If you're stupid and you receive, a great inheritance when your parents pass away, you think, I'm set for life. But if you're stupid, you're going to blow the whole money, all the money. So what's the point? Better to have some wisdom. And again, notice that Kohelet is going back and forth. He's ping-ponging. Back in the very first chapter, he said, what is wisdom, going to get me in life? But he is telling you being stupid is a lot worse than, being wise. Wisdom is as good as a patrimony. If you're wise, you can make a lot of money. Right? If you're stupid, you're going to blow whatever money you inherit. And even better for those who behold the sun, for those people who live on earth. Verse 12, for to be in the shelter of wisdom is to be also in the shelter of money. Meaning, if you're smart, you can make money, as opposed to just inheriting it. Keep in mind that this is part of wisdom literature, and we've said over and over again, wisdom literature was specifically geared for the upper class. These were people who were born into money and into wealth, right? And so we're being told being in the shelter of wisdom is also to be in the shelter of money. And the advantage of intelligence is that wisdom preserves the life of him who possesses it. If you're stupid, you're going to blow your money and your fortune. If you're smart, you can make money and you'll be smart enough, hopefully, to keep it. So again, he's speaking to the wealthy young men who figure, I got it made. My father's rich. I'm going to inherit. My life is going to be easy street. And he's sort of warning them, don't be so sure, right? You still need to learn, to study, to be smart in what you do. Verse 13, consider God's doing. Who can straighten what God has twisted? We don't run the world. We don't understand the world. God does things that are mysteries to us. Don't think you're ever going to figure it out or that you can go God one better, right? So there, again, we've seen this image of there is a God. He's not necessarily your good friend. And we don't understand why God does what he does. You just need to accept it and not to try to tick him off, because then you're going to really be in trouble. Verse 14, so in a time of good fortune, enjoy the good fortune. In a time of misfortune, reflect. The one no less than the other was God's doing. Consequently, man may find no fault with him, with God. So if you had to say in one sentence, and he said this to us a couple of times, he's going to continue to tell us this, that here's what life is all about. In a time of good fortune, enjoy it. Don't question it. Don't say, I'm putting it all aside for the future. You know what? If good things happen, enjoy them. Appreciate them for now. And if bad things happen, you should stop and you should say, what can I learn from this? The one no less than the other was God's doing. Things don't happen by accident. If bad things happen, Kohelet believes it's because God sent them to you. Why? Was God being just in all of this? We'll never know. But know that it's not accident. It's because God wanted this to happen. So you need to stop and think, what message is God sending me? Consequently, man may find no fault with him. If your response to bad things happening to you is to be angry at God and to curse God, you know what? God's going to be angry at you and he's going to dump more bad things on you. That's Kohelet's belief about God and the way the world works. So when good things happen, thank you very much, enjoy them. Bad things happen, what is God trying to tell me, right? What do I need to do to get him off my back, right? We move on. Verse 15, in my own brief span of life, I have seen both these things. Sometimes a good man perishes in spite of his goodness, and sometimes a wicked one endures in spite of his wickedness. The ultimate question for philosophy, and especially for religion, is tzaddik viralo, the righteous man who has bad things that happen to him, virasha, and a wicked man, vitovlo, who has good things that happen. That goes against everything the Torah, the Bible, wisdom, experience would make us think. That's the ultimate question. Why does this happen? And Kohelet is telling us we just don't know, right? And what are the traditional answers besides Kohelet? You know, the basic answer is if you're a good person and something bad is happening, then you're being punished here as opposed to in the next world. You'd rather be punished here than eternity in hell. And if you're a wicked person who seems to be getting away with murder, you're being rewarded for whatever good things happen now. When you get to the next world, there's going to be no mitigating factors. It's all going to be punishment. You're going to hell and you're going to burn in the fire, right? So that's the traditional answer. When that didn't seem to be satisfactory, then the secondary answer was, why do bad things happen to good people? Maybe it's to teach them lessons. Maybe it's so that they become more sensitive, right? We just don't know. But this is the ultimate question, and Kohelet's response is, it's just the way it is. You better accept it. Don't try to figure it out. And then he tells us in verse 16, if it's true that sometimes good people suffer and bad people get away with murder, look at 16. So don't overdo goodness and don't act the wise man to excess, or you may be dumbfounded. Can you imagine a rabbi or anybody else trying to teach this as the main lesson? Since you don't really ever know why bad things happen to good people, you shouldn't be too good. Now, really? That's the lesson you should walk away with? Maybe you should try to be the wicked person who gets away with murder. Maybe that's what's his point. But then he tells us in the next verse, Don't overdo wickedness, and don't be a fool, or you may die before your time. So don't go to the extremes. That seems to be the main lesson. Don't be extreme. Don't be extreme in your goodness. Don't be extreme in your wickedness. Okay, what does it mean, don't be extreme in your goodness? So one possibility is somebody who basically spends all of their time in praying or self-affliction or being an ascetic and denying yourself any pleasure. What's the point of that, of making yourself miserable? You think that that's going to get you points with God and therefore you're going to be happier? The answer, the traditional answer is no, right? So don't go overboard in being righteous. And again, that idea, don't pray, don't spend your days praying or afflicting yourself. That's not what we're looking for. Another possibility, I think we've mentioned it before, is the idea of being over righteous, which can lead to a kind of stupidity. Remember, the classic example is a very religious man is walking by the beach and he sees a woman is drowning. And he says, I should jump in and I should save her. He said, however, I would have to grab her body and I might touch the wrong part. And then if I pull her out, then I'm going to have to give her mouth to mouth. That would be, I'm a married man. That wouldn't be a nice thing for me to do. So therefore, you know what? Being so righteous, I can't really jump in and save her life. Clearly, this is stupidly being too righteous. All right? You could also make the case, how about all the people we've all seen in our lives who know they're sick, who know that they shouldn't fast on Yom Kippur, but who come into synagogue and who say, I haven't eaten on Yom Kippur in 50, 60, 70 years, and I'm not going to start now. And of course, they get sick, they end up fainting, and end up in the hospital. That too is an example of being overly righteous, more righteous than we need to do or to be. Should we fast on Yom Kippur? Yeah, but if we're sick, we shouldn't. Okay, so that's where you draw the line. And then what about the next verse when he says, and don't be overly wicked or overly stupid? In other words, he's saying, look, I can tell you never be bad. He said, but that's ridiculous because all of us, nobody's perfect. Nobody's totally good. Every one of us is going to do bad things. So therefore, the only counsel I can give you is don't be more bad than is prudent to be. I know you're going to lie. I know you're going to exchange gossip. But you don't have to go around libeling people, getting them and yourself in trouble that's, inappropriate. Or how about don't be overly stupid? Yes, kids are going to do dumb things, like go to college in a COVID pandemic and go to parties with 300 other people. He would say, okay, I get it. You're not going to stay in your room alone 6 feet apart from everybody else. But to go to a party with 200 other people without a mask, that's just asking for trouble. We know that kids are going to like to do cool things, which sometimes are stupid. But did you see on the news the other day, the guy who was surfing on the back of a bus, right? So the bus isn't aware that there's somebody hanging on to the very end of the back of the bus, and the bus is streaking through the town 40, 50, 60 miles an hour, and the guy's having a great time. Of course, if his grip loosens, he falls off and he's dead. So ultimately, Kohelet is saying, don't be more evil than you need to be. Don't be stupider than you need to be. I get it. You're going to do bad things. You're going to do dumb things. But draw the line. Not too stupid. Okay? So, 18. It is best that you grasp the one without letting go of the other. Find the middle road, the golden mean. All philosophies, all religions try to teach that. Find yourself somewhere in the middle. You're not going to be a saint, and you're not going to be, an evil devil. Find some place in the middle. It is best, without letting go of the other, for one who fears God will do his duty by both. 19. Wisdom is more of a stronghold to a wise man than 10 magnates that a city may contain. So even though he told us wisdom isn't the whole answer, better to be smart, because being smart is better than being, 10 leaders of a city. It's more of a stronghold, more of a protection than 10 powerful men. In verse 20, for there is not one good man on earth who does what is best and doesn't err. And again, we're all going to make mistakes. We're all going to do stupid things. Try not to be too stupid. 21. Finally, don't pay attention to everything that is said, so that you may not hear your slave reviling you. For well you remember the many times that you yourself have reviled others. Don't be overly concerned with what people say about you. We're all interested. We all want to know, what are they saying? We all want to see what people have to think of, what people think about us, what they're talking about us behind our back. You really don't want to know, Kohelet tells us. Because remember, you've done it to others, and you were a little vicious when you did it, and your servants, your people, are going to do it to you. Right? And don't listen behind the walls to what they're saying. It's only going to break your heart, and it's only going to, make you feel bad. Verse 23. All this I tested with wisdom. I thought I could fathom it, but it eludes me. The secret of what happens is elusive and deep down. Who can discover it? And he reminds us, better to be smart than stupid, but don't think smart is going to solve all your problems or teach you everything you need to know. I put my mind to studying, exploring, and seeking wisdom and the reason of things, and to studying wickedness, stupidity, madness, and folly. Okay, now we're going to come to a very disturbing idea, upsetting idea. Maybe it's an idea that's going to give us an insight into who this Kohelet was and why he is the man that he is. Verse 26. Now, I find woman more bitter than death. She is all traps. Her hands are fetters, handcuffs, and her heart is snares. He who is pleasing to God escapes her, and he who is displeasing is caught by her. See, this is what I found, said Kohelet, item by item in my search for the reason of things. As for what I sought further but did not find, I found only one human being in 1,000. And the one I found among so many was never a woman. He says, I looked and I found, I counted. In 1,000 people, there was only one smart guy. 999 were ignorant or were fools or were no good. And the one person out of 1,000 who was good, believe me, it wasn't a woman. Women, he tells us, are the source of all trouble. In the Hebrew, right, important that we look at verse 26. He says, Umotzeani mar mimavet, and I find more bitter than death at ha-isha. When he says ha-isha, the woman, does he mean women in general? Or does he mean my woman, my wife? She's the one that's made my life miserable and turned me into the sourpuss and the negative, pessimistic guy that I am, right? Or is it woman, womanhood, all women that are like this? That's a puzzle. So what's going on with this guy? How could he say such a thing? Okay, remember the following. Kohelet, or the author of Kohelet, lives sometime in the 3rd century BCE. It's the Hellenistic period. It's part of the genre of wisdom literature. It's upper middle class, upper class people. And if we go to another book of wisdom literature, the ultimate book of wisdom literature, which is the book of Proverbs, and if we look at chapter 7, I want you to listen to what another author in the same genre is teaching other upper class rich men. Okay? So listen to this. He says, from the window of my house, through my lattice, I looked out and saw among the simple, among the youths, a lad devoid of sense. He was crossing the street near her corner, walking toward her house in the dusk of evening. In the dark hours of night, a woman comes toward him, dressed like a harlot, with set purpose. She is bustling and restive. She is never at home. Now in the street, now in the square, she lurks at every corner. She lays hold of him and kisses him. Brazenly she says to him, I had to make a sacrifice of well-being. Today I fulfilled my vow. So she's pretending to be religious. I'm coming back from shul right now. Therefore I have come out to you, seeking you. I have found you. I have decked my couch with covers of dyed Egyptian linen. She's seducing this rich young man. I have sprinkled my bed with myrrh, aloes, and cinnamon. Let us drink our fill of love till morning. She says, come home with me, right? Let's get drunk, not only on wine, but on each other. Let us delight in amorous embrace. For the man of the house is away. Now we find out she's a married woman who's telling this rich young man, my husband's away on a business trip. Come back to my house with me. He is off on a distant journey. He took his bag of money with him and will return only at mid-month. She sways him with her eloquence, turns him aside with her smooth talk. Thoughtlessly he follows her, like an ox going to the slaughter, like a fool to the stocks for punishment, until the arrow pierces his liver. He is like a bird rushing into a trap. Notice the word trap, which Kohelet just spoke about. Not knowing his life is at stake. Again, maybe the husband's going to return home right away. Or maybe somebody's going to see the wife taking this young man into the home, and they're going to tell the husband at mid-month when he gets back, and the husband's going to come looking for this young man and is going to kill him. Now, sons, listen to me. So the book of Proverbs tells the rich young men Pay attention to my words. Let your mind not wander down her ways. Do not stray onto her paths, for many are those she has struck dead, and numerous are her victims. Her house is a highway to Sheol, meaning to hell, leading down to death's inner chambers. So this is the tradition of wisdom literature. This is what the teacher was telling, the hired teacher, the man who was hired by the rich man to teach his young sons, boys, this is what you need to stay away from. There are women out there who are going to seduce you and entice you, and don't let them do it. They're going to get you in trouble, maybe even get you killed, right? And if it's not her husband who's going to kill you, maybe it's venereal disease, because she's been around the block more than once, right? And you don't want to go with her. So that's the background that Kohelet comes into. The notion that women are trouble, especially trouble to rich men, because they're all gold diggers. Okay, so that's the world that Kohelet lives in and that he's speaking from. And when he says to us, again in verse 26, now I find woman more bitter than death. She is all traps, her hands are fetters, her heart is snares. He who is pleasing to God escapes her. Now, is he telling us, therefore, you don't want to get married, you don't want to be involved with women at all? Or is he just telling us, stay away from those kind of women, from the fast women who are going to try to trick you and trap you and get you in trouble? We got to jump ahead here to chapter 9. We'll get to it in 2 weeks, but we need to see something now. In chapter 9 of Kohelet, Ecclesiastes, verse 9, he's going to tell us the following. Enjoy happiness with a woman you love all the fleeting days of life that have been granted to you under the sun, all your fleeting days. For that alone is what you can get out of life and out of the means you acquire under the sun. This seems to be a very different guy. In chapter 7, he says, women are worse than death. And in chapter 9, he says, all you're left with in life is finding a woman, a special woman, and spending your life with her as long as you can. So which is it? Now, is it that these are contradictory statements? Is it that he wrote this book over a long period of time, and at one moment he was hurt by a woman, he was dumped by a woman, he was tricked by a woman, and he's angry at all women, and so that's chapter 7. And at another point in his life, chapter 9, he seems to be saying, the best thing in life there is to find a woman you love and enjoy life with her, right? So is that what's happening here? Is it that we have sections from different moments in his life which somehow got put together in one book, and what isn't here is when I was 24 years old and in love, this is what I felt. And when I was, tricked by a woman at 30 out of my money, this is what I felt. And then when I was old and there was nothing left for me but me and my wife, this is what I felt at that time. Okay, that's a possibility. It's also possible that he's not being so particular with his language, that maybe what he meant in chapter 7 was what the book of Proverbs meant back in chapter 7 there. In other words, there's a certain kind of woman that you want to stay away from. The kind of woman that you want to find is, the kind of woman that he refers to in chapter 9. So what is that woman all about? Well, clearly, that woman, the chapter 9 one that you want to spend your life with, you know what? Her whole life is, she's not going to be out on the street. Her whole life is going to be in the home, taking care of the house, her husband, her family. She's not concerned about material things so much, right? So maybe that's the kind of woman that he's talking about. So we're dealing with not two different moments in his life, but two very different kinds of women. But he just wasn't very specific or descriptive when it came to figuring out those two different types of women. Maybe this notion of the woman in chapter 7, I find more bitter than death is women. Maybe that explains a lot. Maybe, in order to understand why he was such a bitter guy, is maybe to the backstory that we don't really have here, but if we read between the lines, he was a rich guy, he was a smart guy, a pretty woman came by, enticed him, he went after her, and it all ended badly. And maybe that forced him to be not just bitter about her, and not just bitter about women in general, but maybe that made him bitter about life, period. And he ultimately, was just so hurt and angry and brokenhearted that he now sees the whole world like that. So, it's a mistake for us just to read Kohelet and the words there and to think this is what he's telling us, and for us to ignore the fact that there's a backstory somehow. A wonderful screenwriter or a novelist would take the 12 chapters of Kohelet and would say, let me try to imagine the story that isn't here. Let me try to imagine who he really was, what really happened to him, why he became the guy with such a frown on his face all the time. That would be a wonderful movie or a wonderful book. And sometimes when we read the Torah, or the Bible, we have to ask ourselves, what are we missing? What's clearly here between the lines, but isn't written in words? And maybe that will help us to understand who he is and who we are, and the message that we can perhaps learn from him. Okay, so we'll pick it up next time with chapter 8.